Good afternoon. This is James Plyer from Flowcana joining the call.
Thank you so much for holding. This is Mendocino. Starting in a couple of minutes.
Thank you.
Hello?
Good afternoon. This is we've got James Plyer from Flowcana on the line.
And this is Karen Byers on the line.
Hi, Karen. This is Paul Hansberry. Did you get that copy of that document I sent you?
I did. It looks really good.
Yeah, I just got the first full draft while we were on the last conference from Legislative Council. So we'll be tweaking that a little bit and should have something to show within the week.
Perfect, Paul. I really appreciate that you are doing this. It's really, when I was campaigning on Prop 64, what I thought we were going to offer.
Well, let's see if we can make it happen.
Great.
Okay, yeah. They're talking to each other. We can hear. That's recent. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Duquette. Thank you for joining us here today. We're going to start with quick introductions and roll call. And what I'm just going to ask you to do is I'm going to go around and just say your name, and then Amanda, you can just check them off. So we'll start with the room, then we'll go to the phone.
Hi, so I'm Vandy. I work with the Planning and Building Services Department. Been working on non-cultivation now since its inception.
And I'm Chris Kerr.
Anna Carnell, I'm the Mendocino County Growers Line Steering Committee.
Name's Dan, representing Light Label Manufacturing.
Andy Day.
Corinne Powell. Kimberly Delacorda, One Feather Ranch.
Jennifer Patry, Wildland Cannabis.
Siobhan Holmes, Department of Agriculture.
Hannah Nelson.
Brent Schultz, Planning and Building Services, County Mendocino.
And who do we have on the phone?
We have James Byers on the line from Flow Cannabis.
Paul Hansberry.
Anyone else?
Karen Byers.
There we go. Thanks, Karen.
I thought that was cute.
So I'm going to move to number 2 on the list. At this working group, the last working group, there was discussion about participation guidelines, and I just wanted to give you an update that we didn't forget about it, that we're looking at kind of what we can do in terms of without board direction. So we'll have more about that at the next meeting, but I just wanted you to know we didn't forget. So at the last meeting, we made the list of the items that we wanted to go over and discuss with staff and come up with some recommendations of what we can do. And the first item on that list that was the most important was microbusiness. And then from there, the group created sub-points that they wanted to go through and discuss with staff. So we have Vandy here, myself, Siobhan, and our planning director as well. So if that works for you, we'll just start with the first bullet point and go from there. So the first one under microbusiness was looking at making microbusinesses a standalone license and evaluating within the license type on the property and not having it tied to a cottage or home occupation. So we want to make that the first discussion point. So I don't know, I can't remember who was the one that brought. You want to kick that one off?
Well, in the sense that what you have stated here is my recommendation for our county, because there are properties where microbusiness could be significantly sustainable license type, and there are no current residences or cottages on parcels. So that's why I'm asking that it be standalone license.
So not having a residence requirement?
As it's currently in our ordinance, microbusinesses are connected to either cottage or home occupation business requirements. and I wish that it were not.
So what I'm hearing is you want micro businesses on your zone, and then having micro businesses and parcels that have cultivation without a home.
The state regs say micro businesses are allowed on any parcel where cultivation is allowed, and I would prefer that we mirror that more accurately.
Micro business allowed on the parcel where cultivation is allowed.
Which, this is Hannah, I think the reason why planning, and Vandy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, why they had to tie it originally, and I'm not saying that has to be true going forward, but originally to either cottage industry or home occupation was, that's a zoning thing, a use of zoning, not the business license part. And the reason why they did that initially was because we were looking for an expedited way for micro businesses to be issued in zones that were not commercial or industrial, and that everybody who has cultivation could be eligible. And the only way that they could do that at the time with the existing zoning codes was to tie it to home occupation or cottage industry, because the type of activity otherwise is not allowed in some of the zones that cultivation is allowed in. Is that correct?
Partially, yes.
Okay.
An additional reason is that a lot of these license types, distribution, manufacturing, retail, when we adopted this ordinance, the CEQA findings was found that we tied the uses to existing zoning uses. So, for example, for distribution, we tied that to the similarity of fleet storage distribution. And so that is a permitted use in industrial, whereas it's not permitted in rangeland or forest land or any of the really cultivation parcels. So if we were to do that, then we have to actually adopt an actual, we'll have to adopt an environmental document, because right now we don't have one for this ordinance. It was adopted using a section, I forget what section it is, where it pretty much says that there's no environmental impact by allowing uses in these places. So by allowing these uses in the more rural areas, we will have to go.
Vandy, does it take an EIR to, I mean, would it maybe go to some? It
could be an EIR, it could be an MSC, but I'm not.
I can also say a controversial word.
Yeah.
General plan.
And the general plan amendments.
Which I think that there's been discussion that needs to happen anyway, but last time it was a 10-year process. But I think that there has been a recognition that even outside of the cannabis realm, whether it's in cultivation or non-cultivation areas, the uses in our current zoning code need to be updated, because when you did look to different uses and the categories that would fit in certain zones, so that it could be a quick process and also comply with CEQA, that a lot of them were antiquated, so couldn't necessarily expand it beyond what seems reasonable. And so I think that if we can separate out the issue of why something happened the way it did and what we can do now moving forward to help make sure that we do interim, medium-term, and long-term steps to help expand the definitions, the uses, the whatever. And so in my mind, the interim is for building and planning to look and see if there are examples of uses that are in the current zoning code that could be updated without it changing the general plan. In other words, I've had the experience of going into building and planning, and if something isn't specifically listed, it's considered to not be an okay use. And the board has given direction that that doesn't make sense either. And so perhaps there can be a review of existing listed uses for each zoning and update them, regardless of cannabis or not, to account for more modern types of examples of uses, both in cannabis and non-cannabis businesses. And then separately, so that's kind of a kind of an immediate thing that wouldn't take anybody else's other than the planning department's review. Then there's the interim step of seeing if there are zoning code amendments that can be made without a general plan update, and then there's any zoning code amendments and other amendments that need to be done in a general plan update. And so I kind of look at it as those three parallel tracks, and that one should not be stopped by the fact that the other one is going to take a long time.
Well, I think in your issue you said was it's the housing requirement.
Well, currently it's tied to some kind of housing issue.
Because I do, being the person who works on all the business licenses, I do find the home occupation industry works really well with the micro business as is. So maybe something that kind of negates that home requirement language could be considered. But I don't think taking away home occupation and cottage industry would benefit micro.
No, I'm not saying that micro wouldn't also apply to potentially cottage and home occupation situations, but that it not only be allowed in those particular scenarios.
So that could be a consideration.
In zones that have cultivation.
Correct. Correct.
But it's only allowed, if it's not identified in that zoning table, I'm sure you'll know it's only allowed with sites of cultivation.
Well, and just so you know, Vandy, under state law, well, actually, this gets to one of Corinne's maybe other points that wasn't expressed, which is under state law, you have to 3 of 4, but cultivation doesn't have to be one of them.
Correct.
Correct.
So I guess there's 2 separate issues. One is seeing if you can remove the home requirement, not use home occupation or cottage industry, but also have another category for cultivation that doesn't require a home. So, for example, rangeland and TPZ doesn't require a home to be present for cultivation. So that's one thing, is to see if you can remove that language in cultivation zones. But then the second issue is in micro-businesses that are non-cultivation, is there anything that can separate out and not require a home as well?
Yeah, I would find issue with allowing a micro-business in a more rural zone without the cultivation, without having an environmental document is the issue.
Because you're tying the environmental review to the cultivation part of it, is that why? Are you saying you're more comfortable with having a micro business in a more rural area but tied to cultivation because of the environmental review that's done under the cultivation ordinance, or because of what?
Well, I think it's because, with cultivation, those activities are accessory to the cultivation. It's not primarily manufacturing. It's not primarily distribution. It's not primarily retail. It's cultivation with retail, with distribution, with manufacturing.
But I guess what I'm going to ask you to consider is the possibility that in a rural area that doesn't have cultivation, that, let's say, is making ice water hash, or whatever it's called now, okay, ice water, using water only, really low-tech method, has a distributor transport-only license, so it's not acting as a distribution hub and having all kinds of vehicles, and is doing non-storefront retail delivery. So in those instances, you're really talking about a mom and pop or a mom or pop being able to make some kind of a value-added product from trim that they buy from other producers, doing this low-tech thing, having their own delivery vehicle and going out there and with their distributor transport only license and their non-storefront retail license.
Do you want it separate from a...
So I'm just,
I would be comfortable with that if it was subject to the cottage industry in the sense of the regulations, maybe not necessarily the home requirement, but...
okay, so I just am asking you to make a note.
I think because it would get that environmental review, and it does have the limitations of like...
So then I'm just asking you to make a note that that's another category to look at removing the home requirement under home occupation or cottage industry without tying it to cultivation.
And Kim?
I have a quick question. I don't know what, if it was state or county that required all products, all cannabis products using microbusiness to be from that exact location?
Yes.
Is that county or is that state? Is that state? Anyway,
Honestly, I mean, this isn't everything's going to be a patchwork and a workaround until we address the larger scale effort, which should probably happen literally next month, is looking at the general plan. Mm-hmm. Because the reason we're so constrained is because how our zoning districts are set up. What are those descriptions? What are those uses required? So there's a lot of these things that we're trying to make exceptions around, and I think maybe we can in the meantime, but I think the bigger issue at hand is if you want to allow more flexibility 5 years from now, we're going to have to address the monster in the room, and that's the general plan. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we can do a lot to kind of piecemeal exceptions.
Big process.
To try to get as many people permitted as possible. But part of the reason that it's limited is, you know, we never intended the unintended consequence of a rural residential 10-acre parcel servicing 5 other cultivation sites and what that means to the neighbors. And there's all these little things that are considered when you do a general plan and zoning districts. So it's how do we know about the unintended consequences? How are we going to take an effect that some of these activities are happening in areas where maybe they were never originally intended, and we may need to reflect that change.
But and then going to mitigate it. Is there a need for mitigation?
And there's CEQA review. When we do exceptions in these ordinances, the reason we can is because there was CEQA done on the general plan.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So was that a county law or is that a state?
Are you referring back to the...
County. If you're a cultivator and you get a micro business, you can only do your product.
And that's not in the state, right?
No, that's in Mendocino.
Okay. Yeah, because that eliminates. I hear you guys have been talking.
And then part of the reason was the conversation of people saying, well, I live in our residential neighborhood and I don't want my neighbor all of a sudden servicing 5 or 6. What is that going to mean for traffic? What is it going to mean for this? So that's the reason why when we do the general plan and we have these things and we do the CEQA review, so then we can say, well, we've already looked at this. Here's your permit. Go.
Okay, so it's county. So that was
Okay. As Sarah is saying, keep the big picture in mind. And from my perspective, the big picture is because of the state regs, which clearly favor large agribusiness activities in the cannabis industry, we are still hopefully a county that has the objective of supporting the small farmer and finding avenues by which they will survive. Micro-business is the biggest opportunity for the small farmer to remain viable because it does not require that they are paying out the wazoo for distributors and taking lower prices for their products and all the economic things that come into being limited. So I know that you're relatively new to this, but I'm sure you've heard a gazillion times that we have to try to keep working to change things so that the main objective is achieved.
I agree, and we also have to work to make sure, because you know who subjects us to do all this CEQA stuff? The state of California.
Yeah.
It would be real nice if they give us an exemption.
Yeah.
But that never happens. So it's the balance of and what's nice about the state is they're allowed to pass regulations and produce a CEQA document that relies on the land use provisions given to us by the state. Okay. So it's a balance.
Yeah.
So there's another thing to say.
And we have to be, and we also, to add to that, we have to be careful, not that we want, and I don't think anybody wants to hurt your business, it's that we can get challenged if we do a zone change or something like that, and we haven't addressed the environmental impacts. Okay. We get lawsuits, and then they file injunctions and stop issuing business licenses.
This is another, though, easy-to-remedy issue, because if you have been in phase 1 in our county, you are in the CEQA baseline already, and you are eligible to stay in that baseline under the mitigated negative deck at the moment. That hasn't been challenged yet.
Baseline called cultivation, not any ancillary businesses that are with it.
Cultivation is the main kicker here. It's the main part of a micro business opportunity for a previous farmer.
And I think it's easier to look at expanding micro-business opportunities and changes we can do for those of you that are cultivating. Very different when we're talking about expanding the zones for micro-business when cultivation is not involved. Because those CEQA that's what I'm saying. Those who are phase 1 cultivators who would benefit from the opportunities to have more activities available to them. That's who I'm. And allowing those small farmers to process for their neighbors is also something we haven't done the CEQA analysis for. Because I want to make it easier, and I also want to make it easier for you to do business with your neighbors. Yes, but we have to look at what that means.
I understand, but I think that micro-business could move forward before that shared activity issue is.
Oh, definitely. And like Hannah said, it's a multiple phase, and we can make these little things, but I think at the same time, the direction, because the general plan amendments take a really long time, so the sooner that recommendation and the sooner the board blesses that, because we can do all of these little things to help the cultivators and their small farms, but 5 years from now, we really need.
And we need that analysis to.
So, and you're right, and Hannah's right. One should not slow down the other.
Stop it. I just want to make sure it's covered in the environmental work we've done.
That's what I think phase 1 cultivators are.
And that's why I think maybe an exception to the home requirement would be.
We'll look at it.
Yeah.
In certain zones.
Because, out of all the micro businesses I have, only one has an issue with not having a residence on it. Every other.
Well, that's because currently it's verboten, and you would probably have more if the code wasn't written the way it is now.
Yeah.
You'd probably have more applications.
Potentially.
Yeah. I do one.
Yeah. Are you ready? So I think this is accompanying the first 3. The micro-business standalone, the expanding the zones, and the general plan update. And I think we have some good direction of looking at what we can do now, and I think what Hannah said is really important.
Yeah.
Looking at short-term, mid-term, and long-term, and getting the processes going and not stopping one because of the other.
Yeah.
This may be a silly question, but with a micro business, do you have to cultivate
where
that license is, where the micro business license?
Yes.
You do have to cultivate.
Yeah.
No, you don't have to cultivate, but all micro-business activity has to be on the same premises.
Okay.
Because cultivation doesn't necessarily have to be one of the facets of your micro
But if you do cultivate, it has to be there.
Yes. Unless the state rules change.
The question is, so lots of people in the county working with our cannabis people, corporations wanting to come in and infuse their money into our local cannabis people. Do we know, so here comes a corporation wanting to get on a permit, a local farmer's permit. They're an LLC and with a micro business. Are they allowed to just come on the permit and be a part of the micro business in that way?
So cultivation is different than facilities. Cultivation is issued to a farmer, to a person,
right,
and name on it. That's the same provisions are in the CSBS.
So, yeah.
We issue licenses
So
to
they
business.
don't want to get on the permit?
Well,
or not an LLC?
But there's a difference between cultivation and a business license.
Right. So
business license, there's no restriction of it has to be issued to, you have to show proof of prior and have to be issued to the actual physical person. Most businesses we issue to a business entity.
Okay. Okay. So is that farmer allowed to put someone, if they're a cultivator, are they allowed to put someone on their permit, on their,
Their micro business permit?
yeah, on their
Cultivation.
cultivation permit?
Not on cultivation.
Not on a, because we want, they should, as many people as you want on the cultivation, all employees and all that, a part of your micro business, right?
So I think we need to unpack what you're asking. Because to me, what I hear is you're wondering, to get a cannabis business license, do you have to demonstrate that you also have proof of prior? Because that is a requirement for a cultivation permit. That is not a requirement for a cannabis business license.
If you're getting a cannabis facilities business license for micro business and you're a cultivator, we're going to ask you about your cultivation license, who it's issued to, is that person a part of the business, but, you know, if that person is a part of the LLC that's applying for a micro business, we're going to issue them a business license.
Right, okay, good. And, okay,
There's not, the provisions are a little different, but we do check to see if that's a real application, like things match up. Yeah, we do make sure that the cultivation and your other things match up.
There's a lot of money coming into our county right now. I'm just like, how do we funnel this into that it goes into the small farmer's bucket so that they get to sit there and do their cultivation and the LLCs or the bigger businesses get to, you know, deal with the taxes and the stuff and just helping them out. It's just like trying to bridge the two together.
Basically, if you have a micro business,
Yeah, like I'm dying.
so basically, if you have a micro business and you do not include cultivation, you can source as much from as many small farmers as you want and manufacture and distribute and sell those products as much as you want.
I mean, if you're in the appropriate zone, like say if you have a micro business in industrial, then yes.
What about an agriculture?
But if you have an industrial and a grandfathered range line, you can't?
Sorry?
But if you have a micro business in a RL? And
So we only allow it in those more rural areas if you have the cultivation.
Right,
So,
right. Okay.
So, but then if you have a micro business with your cultivation, no, you can't be a distributor for your neighbors.
Right. You can't be a distributor for your neighbors.
You could only manufacture and distribute and sell your own product.
No, we allow processing like
Buy from your neighbors, but you would have to be selling it for yourself.
Heck, we rule community, ag, upland residential,
I thought you were talking about what was
C1, C2, industrial.
Remember when we had the
Almost all of them.
Independent processing license, they process.
even candle makers?
We've issued at least 4.
Did I present my
So the next one that was on the list was criteria for compliance and streamlining protocol. I can't remember who brought that one up either last time.
That's just a good idea, right?
Wait, so what are we doing about, I mean, what are the next steps as far as the first thing?
Planning and building, looking, expanding micro businesses to cultivation properties that don't have a residential unit. Looking at what kind of flexibility there can be in terms of expanding the zoning table for micro businesses and kind of looking at the midterm and long term. So essentially kind of looking at that general plan question.
What's the zoning in?
Industrial.
There's a map, there's a chart.
Okay.
Industrial with an AP. It also is allowed on RC.
Not on agriculture.
I have a question for Vandy. This is Paul Hansberry. Vandy, you mentioned that the cultivation would be the primary use. But as it sits now, when it's tied to the cottage or home occupation, the primary use would be residential, not cultivation. All the other activities would be accessory uses.
To the home?
Yes.
I think a lot of the analysis, I would assume, would be around accessory to cultivation in terms of.
No, but he's got it actually legally a correct point.
And the other problem here is what the state,
The state doesn't care about zoning.
Yeah.
they don't care about zoning, but they care that you don't do commercial cannabis activities in a home. So we're tying it basically to some kind of home-based something. The state's taken it out of the home, and we need to make our own local adjustments that are appropriate.
But Corinne, the difference is that they're not, the home occupation and cottage industry don't require you do the activity inside the home. Wait, let me just finish. Not inside the home, just in an accessory building of a residential. But Paul's original statement, and I'm sorry, I saw your hand go up, so I'm sorry for interrupting, is actually legally probably accurate, that if you're basing everything on home or cottage industry, those zoning codes specifically say where residential is the primary use. So then if you're saying cultivation has to be the primary use.
I'm talking about in the micro business. In the micro business, the primary use is the cultivation.
Not the zoning code.
Correct.
So did you get that, Paul, that it's not that the zoning code primary use is the cultivation, the primary use, at least as it has been under home or cottage industry, is a residential use in general for that land, but then if you're having a micro business that is tied to cultivation, then the primary use is the cultivation and the accessory uses are the other micro business, but not in terms of zoning, but in terms of purpose of the micro business.
Correct.
Okay.
I don't really understand that, because I think that what I said at first was if you're talking about a micro business, the entire micro business is an accessory to the primary, which is residential.
But I think what Dandy was saying is that there's a difference in planning and buildings analysis between the first step, which is zoning code and uses, and then a second step, the business activities and their uses, and that when they're doing the second step, it's not dependent on the first step. In other words, once you've passed that first hurdle and you're on land that as zoned for anything, it has a primary residential use. Regardless of whether there's a house there, by the way, you can have it be a primary zoned residential use even if there's no house, by the way. It's just the zoning of the property, the parcel itself. Then you move on, and the conditions of the business license, not of the zoning code, are requiring that the cultivation be the primary use and that the other activities of the micro business are the accessory use, but the reason for that is tied to the environmental review that was done under the cultivation ordinance that has not been done under the non-cultivation ordinance. Did I get that right?
Wow.
You think?
Yes.
Okay.
Wow. Does it even apply if it's rangeland or ag land or
Yes.
Because it's the primary, like on rangeland, the primary thing is rangeland, and if you're cultivating and you can not argue that the house is secondary to the actual use of the land. If it's zoned ag land or upper rangeland or rangeland, it's primary use.
So there's not, in the zoning code, there's not only one primary use.
Correct.
There can be multiple primary uses. So with rangeland, you can have several primary uses, one of which is residential. Doesn't mean you have to have a house there, but it is a zoning code primary use on that kind of zone. So it's not, it doesn't exclude one or the other.
And so that works for micro business, but like if you, I think the concern, I guess, it sounds like is if people are in a residential neighborhood and they're cultivating, their cultivation permit, and they want to get a micro business permit, is that going to become a problem because their primary is zone residential and there's a house there? No.
Actually, it's the opposite.
Opposite, yeah.
Okay.
And we don't want you know, we don't want a requirement so restrictive that in order to qualify, you put up a really shabby but passing structure.
Were we gonna add just the removal of the dwelling?
I have that.
Okay. I didn't hear it on the recap.
That's the easy part.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we take wins when you can.
Absolutely. I'm there.
So what's the next criteria for?
Criteria for compliance plus streamlined protocol. I'm not quite sure what,
Isn't that what
the original intent of that.
Are we talking about like the white paper that someone could go in and do some checking off? I think, wasn't that?
Could I ask a question of staff? Clearly streamlining is everyone's objective and maybe even mandated to staff more than they like to hear. Because every time I'm at a board meeting, that's the direction. We've got to streamline. We've got to make this easier. Okay, as long as that's been going on, I haven't seen much change in the process. The process might get a little tweak now and then, but basically, all of the same conditions continue to apply in terms of what one must do to have an approved business of whichever kind it is. So, again, I have a cultivator's perspective, but can staff tell us in the public sector what really can be done? Because we've gone through a gazillion, well, not that many, but we've gone through a lot of staff people who've been tasked with the same thing. Let's streamline this process. We want to get more people into the system. We want more, tax revenue, fee revenue. We want all these things which require that people come into the system. And yet, there are precious few incentives, if any, and I don't see anything changing as I'm observing from the outside. So can staff fill us in on how we're streamlining as we sit here today?
Yes, and I would say let's take them in two separate. The cultivation and facilities are not alike whatsoever. Frankly, as long as you don't have to, as long as your building is up to code, we can get you in and out for the most part. Manufacturing takes a little longer. Some of the issues we're finding right now is people wanting to get licenses for buildings that aren't even occupiable at this point.
So, can I ask a question about that? Because unfortunately Brent had to leave, and we really need somebody from the building permit side to help us understand, because really what I'm seeing, and this is relevant to people needing okay now for state licenses, is that there's a minimum of an 8-week backlog in building permit approval.
So the backlog is not an issue. So what we have is that a lot of people come in and apply, and they would like so typically, regardless if you're cannabis or not a business, we don't issue a business license unless there is a certificate of occupation.
Right,
occupancy. So we have a lot of people, and we all, and then Elton and the 205 block of North State Street. It's under construction. It's 60% done, and they want us to issue a license.
Right.
Now we can issue temporary licenses if we can give you a temporary occupancy, but that's the issue. Is we have a large amount, not all of them, but I would say we probably have about 25 that are in the queue. That's the problem.
Or and they haven't even started construction because they want to see if they're going to be eligible, or they're waiting for an engineer or an architect to stamp their plans or whatever. And so I totally appreciate that that's the issue, but there's 3 categories. There's the people who have submitted building plans, and I know that you don't require the building to be built, just approved plans, right? But the plans, from the time you submit it to the time it gets approved, there's an enormous backlog.
And there's, again, I'm going to separate cultivation from facilities, because the facilities ordinance is different.
I agree.
You must meet the building code.
I agree.
You must meet the planning code. We'll give you a business license when you can occupy your building. So there's that. So there's the cultivation. We've issued a lot of it, but we have a lot of people that are under construction.
Right.
We have it. Their building permits have been issued. we're waiting to do that final inspection and say, yay, you've completed it. So there is that, and
But I'm talking about before that. I totally appreciate that. I'm saying that I have clients who submitted building plans to the building department on the building permit side, not the planning side, and they've been waiting months. And of course,
cultivation or non-cultivation?
Non-cultivation, and it's not the building department's fault. I'm not trying to lay blame.
I would say come talk to us about individual cases, because there is a process of when people are applying to us and us sending letters saying, you're missing this document and that document. And I just want to address this, what can we do? We've been talking about this a lot internally. We need to do more public education and outreach regarding the standards of the things we need. Because I get what you're saying, but for individual people that have put in applications for a building permit and they haven't heard back, the best thing you could do is give me the name, give me the application, and we'll go from there. Because we have a lot of people that have waited until October, November, December. Plus we have all of Redwood Valley rebuild. We're trying to get through them as fast as we possibly can. We have a number of them issue. We're waiting for construction to finish. And if you have a couple people that are having a hard time, the best way is come and talk to us, give us the name, give us the license information, because every single one is different, and so we're at different stages here.
I understood before Mary Lynn left that she had said, and maybe I misunderstood it, that you don't actually have to occupy the building yet. You can get a temporary local business license for a facility, non-cultivation, if you have stamped building plans that have been approved, even if you haven't even started construction yet. So therefore, the certificate of occupancy would...
Yeah, so we have buildings. So typically, if you're going to rent a suite and you have work to do on the suite, that's right. I'm renting a suite. I got to do a few things to customize it for my manufacturing, rather than this building's not in existence.
I'm talking about the second part.
That, yes. But we have a lot of the buildings, the people that are leasing don't even have a completed space to even start their building permits on the work they need to do in the building because they can't get into it yet.
So, sorry, Kim's had it.
Kim. Sorry to ask me, but I'm representing like 15 people I'm trying to help to convince to get a micro-business permit.
Yeah.
But it's all these other things, and they're all farmers, obviously, because it's who I am. One of the big hurdles is the F1 commercial structure. Even if you have a residence, even if you're living there, even if you're permanent, on-site residence, occupancy, the whole thing, to put an F1 commercial structure, no matter how small, just to fulfill the requirement in the middle of nowhere, they're all like, why do we have to have, look, let's do it. So I'm trying to get a set of plans with a modular structure that they can put almost anywhere. There's a sit panel structure. But here's the thing. In working with the building department, it has to not only have the plans approved. I could do like a kit for somebody. So Sean can just go, okay, that's approved. And when he does it again, it's like super easy.
Right.
Nice.
We've been trying to do that too.
Have a city engineer go, or a county engineer go, okay, it can be here, and oh, here's just where your slab goes. Okay. And he can do repeat, like a kit. Okay. Problem is, even if it gets those plans done and Sean approves one of them, then he told me that it has to not only be approved, but then it has to be finished and inspected before you can get even a temporary or any kind of approval from the county. So the state, because I'm in the middle of this, I'm like the guinea pig. The state's going, finish, get this done, because the CDFA wants me to, I'm in the middle of the annual and it's almost done, and they're going, when we finish this, you have to pay for it, you have to, do that. The BCC is going, don't do that, because we take over the cultivation and you will not get credited that loss of money that you just paid for your cultivation permit. It'll be gone. And we want you to get this micro-business now. It's like, doop. So they're waiting, and they want just even a temporary from the county, like maybe if we can just do a set of plans and get the plans approved and get some sort of temporary approval from the county, while you construct the thing, wait for an architect, wait for the construction people to have time, because they're all busy with all this stuff. So getting a temporary county just to give to the BCC to get past that.
It's interesting, because then we have the BCC contact us and say it's building permitted and up to code.
That's
So it's
real.
But if
It's real.
But wait. But if it's permitted, I mean, again, this gets to my issue of if you have it signed off on by the building permit people saying these plans are approved, they have to then later sign off on the occupancy. So we're talking about this in between. But I have a question for you, because I've been trying to work on the same thing. But we can't find an architect or an engineer who will stamp the plans each time. You got it. Okay, great. That's fantastic.
It's a combination of an engineer in Colorado that
has their license in
California. Certified in California. Colorado, Oregon, and California. They're putting an office in Reading. So once they do that, it's an engineer for these modular units.
Yeah.
You would have to have a civil engineer do the site. Okay.
No, of course.
Right.
But in terms of plans.
But the question.
They were supposed to be here. We're calling them and see if they.
I did email them
So
to see what, yeah.
if there is, like the state, the BCC, when I talk to them all the time, but if there was a structure and a residence that is permitted, that has been inspected, that does have an occupancy permit, it is up to code, but you're trying to fulfill this extra structure just for this micro business, can they give us a break and wait till we construct it for the final, approval? But some sort of temporary thing to get past that, it's like a point in the license application where you just stop.
And I honestly think that in order to accommodate some of this stuff, we have to reopen up the ordinance. Because our 10 program is not, we can wait till the building permit comes back, but, because I'm not the expert at building, but our temporary license is very narrow, and they're interpreting it a particular way, and what you're asking us to do is something you don't normally ever do for business licenses. So it's a big change to how we treat normal businesses. So
it's like a temporary, they're trying, but we have Redwood Valley construction.
See, it's hard to sign off on an activity that's non-existent.
Right.
That the state is also inquiring directly to us about.
They say something's going to be here. Can you tell us on your records if this is up to California building code?
But that you can answer. Wait a minute. I want to break this down because I think that you could do what the state's doing with provisionals on the cultivation end or on any end. You could do a provisional conditioned on completing it with a certificate of occupancy. You can answer the question that is this up to code? Yes, what we have okayed. It is stamped by an engineer. It is signed off.
We have plans for a building, but it's not in existence.
But it doesn't, they're not asking, is it in existence? They're asking, is this?
They're not. That's not what they're asking us.
Yeah. They want to know everything. They want to know more about the structures than we ever anticipated.
Yeah.
So I'd just like that, Sean Connell, who's in the building division, is on his way over here.
Great, thank you, Vandy.
Before Sean gets here, you asked about Streamline. I wanted to speak to cultivation. We are under, right now, the Department of Agriculture has been asked to streamline the process. And yet, when did we get direction from the ad hoc on what some of the recommendations were going to be? It's hard to streamline a process that is literally evolving. A. B.
I know your pain.
So part of why you see the Department of Agriculture hands off in certain positions is because we know it's going to change. We don't know how it's going to change. And trying to implement new systems only takes up your time. So it's very difficult for us to chase around something that's growing that we don't have any control over. Second, to streamline the process, I think we need to unpack that. The process of applying versus the process of approval. None of the requirements for cultivation have been reduced. So we're still taking in 100-plus page
and that
applications.
was my point.
Yeah. So, and that's not going to be on the Department of Agriculture, right? The Department of Agriculture takes direction from the Board of Supervisors.
Well, that's my point. And they're the ones who are saying to you, come on, you guys streamline, and you're saying, how can we? Because you can't decide what you want.
Right.
So somehow that has to be communicated, because everybody would like things streamlined, but we can't do it if...
Trust me, Corinne, it's been communicated.
Well,
we have no control of an elected official.
And
honestly, the more you guys advocate.
But so do they. So all I'm saying is, this is a moot point. We should even take it off the list because it's beyond our control.
And I mean, we're doing internally as much as we can in the that we can control. We're working on a complete overhaul of our application, our database system, and trying to go as much digital as possible, cleaning up the data, streamlining our internal processes to go completely paperless. And we're trying to do as much as we can with the control we have. But
and the bandwidth.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need to hear from me how much our department has gone through.
So, if people haven't met Sean already, this is Sean.
Hi guys, I'm Sean. Sorry I'm late.
Oh, it's you.
Oh, yay! Yes, that's great.
So all your building questions.
Okay, so I'm going to rephrase if that's okay with everybody. So issues are a couple. One is at the state licensing level, people are caught in a catch-22 where they initially applied for a cultivation license. This is one scenario.
Yeah.
They initially applied for a cultivation license with the state. They're now at the point where that's basically ready to be done, an annual, not just a temporary, and they're being asked to pay the license fee. But in the meantime, they know that doing a micro-business is a better model for them. They have a problem because they don't yet have a building permit and certificate of occupancy on whatever proposed buildings or structures they're going to be using in the micro-business.
Right.
If they go forward and have to pay the cultivation annual license fee, which could be really a lot of money, they'll never get that money back. And the BCC, which governs the micro-businesses, is saying, no, don't pay CDFA's annual fee, finish your BCC. But because building and planning won't issue, or the county won't issue a provisional or temporary micro-business license because the certificate of occupancy is not signed off on, they can't. So that's one problem. The other problem is the issue of F1 occupancy on micro-businesses that are really micro, like there's no outside employees, there's no anybody, but because of the way that our building official has interpreted for example, processing building needs F1, or even like making bubble hash or whatever.
Everything outside of cultivation is
exactly. And so the question arose, so the first question was, is there anything we could do in between a provisional or whatever where you have not a certificate of occupancy, but you have approved building plans that have gone through building and planning. The second question is there anything we can do about loosening up the F1 occupancy requirements in micro businesses where there aren't any other employees ever? And then the third question is having to do with how the tremendous backlog on the building permit end of the world is because of the fires, because of everything. But people are stuck because they don't have even a quick way to get a building permit reviewed. So even if you did number 2, where you said, okay, we figure out a provisional, we have no way, or not number 2, number 1, we have no way of even getting the building plans approved quickly. So it's kind of, number 1, is there anything we could do about provisionals without a certificate of occupancy? Number 2, is there anything we can do about F1 loosening up in any way? And number 3, because of the backlog and the inability to process building permit applications, is there anything that can be done to allow people to move forward with what the state is requiring, which is, you know, you guys to sign off, basically?
So, and I'm going to lean a little on you, Vandy, because of your knowledge of the ordinance, but my understanding is that our our cannabis facility ordinance doesn't allow that pathway like the cultivation ordinance allows the pathway forward. When you have a holdup in the cultivation ordinance, we built in a pathway to move you forward. That's the compliance plan mechanism. In the building plans, there's no business in the entire county that we authorize to go into business if you don't have a building.
Right.
It's just, it's the priority.
Not only if you don't have a building, but if you haven't gotten the certificate of occupancy.
Correct. Which means it's not done. It's not a final building, so we can't ensure public health and safety at that point. So that's the stickler, is the way that the ordinance is written, plus Title 24 of the California Building Code, which is what the county has adopted and which we enforce. So that's that portion.
So basically, you're saying, no, we need the certificate of occupancy.
It's a requirement of the building. Correct.
Okay.
Now there are abilities for temporary occupancy under the code, and that's an appeal to the building official. But you need to be done. I mean, we're talking like finish work is where you can get temporary occupancy. So if your walls need to be painted, if like your baseboards need to go in, those types of things. But all your major life safety accessibility features per business in California have to be in place before we can authorize a business to go into work. And the ordinance doesn't allow us to condition your business license. When you have a business license, you have a fully operational business license.
Yeah, you can't condition the business. If you have a license, you can do the activities that
you have a license for. And then about the difference between F1 occupancy and utility occupancy, the code is pretty specific right now. It changes every 3 years. There are ways that, as an independent person, you can appeal to the ICC, that's the International Code Council. You can write them an actual report and send it off to a gathering of building officials, not just California.
Sean, it's actually Mike Oliphant's interpretation of the code. It's not specified in the code that sitting with scissors is, in fact, the kind of processing that was envisioned when processing was the use.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So the building code, the building code only identifies minimum standards. That's it. It's minimum standards. So it is minimum standards for the entire industry based in that building structure. So what you're saying is that hand trimming, I can't make that decision.
No, but Mike Oliphant, it's another, it's not written into what I'm saying is it's actually not written into the code. It is an interpretation of what is written into the code.
It is Chapter 3 of the California Building
Code. It doesn't, there isn't any reference to trimming with scissors. It says processing.
Correct.
The interpretation of Mike Oliphant is that trimming with scissors equals
processing by definition of the ordinance.
So let's change the definition in the ordinance.
I'm not the guy to ask that.
No, but it's that, I mean, this group is here to make recommendations to change the bloody ordinance. So if there are things that you know from your inside perspective as to how that could be done, could you share those with us?
So the ordinance needs to say what in order for the interpretation of the building code
again, you're asking the wrong person. I don't know. I cannot speak to how Mike Oliphant will interpret the building code.
Right.
That's not a question to me.
And what happened was last time Brent agreed to look into, and in fact, when Brent's first meeting after he got hired, he had said that he is looking into whether or not those definitions can change, and he was going to be talking to Mike about the rationale and whether there's any wiggle room, and we still have not heard any update on that. And so I totally appreciate that it's not you, but we're going around and around and around about the same issues for the past year.
And Mike.
And I will tell you honestly, if you would like to have that addressed in the code, you should appeal to the International Code Council. That's who writes codes for not just this state that adopts them through ICC, but they write building codes that address national minimums, and I support International Code Council, international minimums for building standards.
We understand that, but that is a very long process, and also on top of that, what I'm saying is regardless of those minimum standards, it's about how the term in the standard is being interpreted here. It's not just
but it's also supported by the definition of our ordinance, because that's how that works.
And it also became processing linked to hemp. We are not processing commercial industrial hemp, which is a far cry.
However, you will not find cannabis written in any legal framework that we enforce currently, other than our local county codes.
I see you.
I'm having guilt from fighting it all the time. As a workaround, maybe. Hi, John. He knows exactly where some of these questions are. In going back and forth with UCC, and one person that I'm talking to, this is not the entire organization. If there was some sort of addendum like we had with cultivation, if you're a cultivator, we have a permit to cultivate. That's one of the micro-business things. We have permission to do that business, right? And we already have a business license. So what you're asking at this point, if you have that license already, is expanding into these other territories. And what if you ask for a temporary provisional permission to operate or get your micro-business license, but not do any of those activities at all that would be in that building that you don't have yet? You have a micro-business license based on your cultivation, and you can have a temporary provisional permission to get the micro-business on these other things like processing, distribution.
It would still need to be changed in the CFBL.
In the Cannabis Facilities Ordinance.
Yeah, because the issuing authority is different. So if you want some type of alternative to the Cannabis Facilities business license, it's in that code section. So it wouldn't be a temporary license. It would have to be called something else. It would have to create the framework and adopt it.
I guess it's temporary. It's potentially expandable micro-business license, but you have permission to do this one now, and as you get that building done, you can do distribution, and get that part done, you can do that. But you can start your micro-business with just cultivation.
The only problem with that is that the state would then say you're not doing the three of the activities.
Said you were going
But temporarily, until you, like if you get your plans.
Well, that's kind of the sticky point is like when we give authorization, we're saying you're good to go.
Right.
Do your business, right? And so there's, after we say yes, there's
No conditions.
Right.
the way we interact is kind of interesting between the state because they said this is everything they said. Are they good to go? Can they operate? And then once that's done, we're shut out.
Right.
So it's not like we.
Excuse me,
It's not. You may think we have a lot of connection, but it's a work in progress. But that's I think the issue is the way it's set up. When we issue you a license, we're saying you're good to go to do everything that's on here, and the way that CFBL is set up. Now, I'm not saying that that's not a good idea, and that's something that we could look at as adding some type of different mechanism to issue this type of license. It's just not in the code right now.
So how are they doing that with cultivation then? Because cultivation they allow, like the BCC's like, well, they give temporary, this is the exact word, they gave temporary permission for cultivation. Why can't they give temporary permission for the other things? And I told them, well, and from my perspective, you have all these other things, and there's reasons why.
I think it's because we regulate different things.
And then
so they have the lovely ability to write their own regulations and issue on it. And traditionally, all land use and building code that's done on the local level. So the people you're talking to don't understand the other state requirements that as a local jurisdiction, we have the authority and we are charged with upholding. And so they may say, well, why can't you just issue a temporary microbusiness for them to do all of these things? And then in our world, it's like, well, why would we issue this if this activity is not even going on in this building? We can't certify that this we can't certify that this retail store is up to health and safety code because it's.
And I think that's where.
So there's a disconnect, and I'm not saying that we can't do something like that where we have some type of provisional license or provisional approval where we can essentially stamp your plans and tell the state you know, here are the plans, but they are not authorized to do business. You can issue them a license, but no business can occur until it's signed off.
The cultivation business and the sales of that is already happening, right? So,
and the way we do our interaction is really, not saying that it can happen, but it's not really set up. It's like, hey, they want to do distribution, retail, and cultivation. Give us a yes or a no whether they can do those activities now.
Can we also argue?
If they don't comply, then you can go back to the state and tell them that, I'm sorry, they didn't comply with this, but they said they were going to do, and then the state will withdraw the license.
I'm with Sean, I can't get into the mind of our building official, but I wanted to say two things. Personally, this is me personally. If I was the building official, I would not want to sign off on a structure that wasn't there. For multiple reasons. Number one. Number two, the ag department, a lot of our work that's not related to cannabis is based on worker protection and worker safety. So all of the conventional ag programs we run are primarily about us checking to make sure people in vineyards are safe and educated and their employers are adhering to all of the requirements. So I think if our goal is to figure a way out forward, we want to be careful with the idea that the county will give anyone a provisional business license if it's based off of the needs of a structure. Because it's just, I can understand why it would be difficult.
I've got an idea, maybe. I don't know if it will work. But I concur with you, Siobhan, except to say that there are other state agencies that also oversee worker safety, and so we do have those in place, but I totally hear what you're saying. I wonder, is there a way, and I'm not saying this would be feasible for everybody, but to approve temporary buildings like rentable, you know, those prefab office buildings that are set up temporary to operate until the rest of the process
Are you talking about construction trailers? Because so I know that people talk about this often. Those construction trailers you see on construction sites that are occupied, they're not meant for occupying that construction trailer for business. That's a place that those workers on that job site should be resting their personal gear, planned gear. They're not meeting rooms. They're not facilitating a business.
That's not how they're used.
Oh, I know that's not how they're used, but that is how they are governed.
Okay. So are there any temporary buildings that you can think of that people could rent and put on their properties temporarily? And I'm not saying every property would be able to do this because of driveways and whatever, but I'm just something that would be a way to have a certificate of occupancy, knowing that you would then have to change and then you would have to submit your plans to BCC in advance and all this other stuff, but I'm just trying to brainstorm some.
I know.
In between.
Because
that sounds expensive.
How many times do you want to pull a permit to get to the final restaurant?
No, I know, but if that's going to shut you out forever.
Because it could move some people that are financially able 20 yards further, closer to the end goal, but it could leave a very large portion of people who have been.
But we're not preventing the other people from.
Right.
We're not saying you have to choose it this way. We're just creating an option. And the reality is that the many tens of thousands of dollars that people are saving if they are eligible for a micro business as opposed to having to get each state license separately may be worth it. And I'm not saying it is. I don't have any idea. I don't know how much these things cost. I don't know any of that. But I'm just trying to come up with things that address the building department, the safety of the workers, the need to move things forward, everything.
Kim, I would just like to thank Sean because this is a duplicate of every course on. I go in this how many times have we?
We're good friends now.
What about this? What about that? I went through the construction building. I went through blah, blah, blah. So with F1, the point I am right now where it has to be bolted onto a slab, it has to have all the F1, I have got the most efficient solution so far, but I still haven't put it in front of you yet because it may have, I don't know. I'm not confident enough yet. I don't want to waste any more time. But inexpensive, it's modular, you can expand it down the line, all these things, trying to find an inexpensive way of getting an F1 commercial structure. But even then,
but it's going to take you 8 weeks, even once you submit that plan.
right,
At least 8 weeks.
however long, and they're so busy in there, like I never complain about how long anything takes before I see. Every time I go in there, all the people, all the things. And so I'm just trying to do one just try to put together something that Sean can go, oh, I can do this more than once, and it's the same exact thing, except where the slab and where the slab is, yes. That's going to save me a bunch of time. And then it's not going to be too expensive. I've got down to like $150, $160 a square foot for a 6-panel constructed F1 compliant building engineered in Colorado and licensed in the state of California. But still,
Right terminology.
Yes, I'm learning. Sean is like, this is exactly like,
This is things I love to hear.
yes, thank you. But still, even to do that, I can get the plans done probably in like 3 weeks. But then you have to have an engineer that has the time to go up to wherever location to do the site plan and approve and do the engineering on the slab. So if there was an efficient, and all those things, if there was a quick way to help people get in the process, but no matter what, because of how busy you guys are, because of everything we all know, and how, the state doesn't understand, and they don't have answers to most of these things when I ask them. You guys at least have answers. The county has answers. The state has, I don't know, or maybe I'll find out, or maybe I won't. But still, no matter what I do, what solution I come up with, we're talking a long, long period of time. And so all of these cultivators cannot do anything other than cultivate, which is fine, but if you want, I'm trying to help farmers not give up and say, diversify, find other ways of, capitalizing on the products that you have. And then also the great thing is, the tax money from microbusiness stays in Mendocino, all the retail, all the things, and I'm so jazzed about this, but if they get their cultivation permit, I'm an example, if my annual comes through and they say you have to pay for it by this date, I've got to do it.
So what about, this is not ideal, so when you get your annual, you're with your annual for a year, right? And then after that, when you reapply, you could reapply as a micro business.
Right. But so you're talking about a whole year at least until I can go to a farmer's market, I can do all these things that are going to bring retail. Right. That's my goal. That sales tax needs to come back here and not Santa Rosa or LA.
It's very not a great situation to be in. We have new regulations. They're always changing the regulations, the interactions between state government and local government and our various regulatory responsibilities and working together.
You could tell the state, hey, we are Mendocino, we need we don't do a yes, no, we're working on it, or we got the contingency plan happening or something. Yes or no, that's all there is with the state.
You mean as far as the authorization?
Yeah, it's a yes, that's what I'm hearing really, it's a yes or a no, they're not like, you can't work.
Public Health asks for a lot more questions.
Yeah.
They have a full questionnaire.
Yeah.
They want to know a lot of details about manufacturers in their application. For the Bureau, it's yes, no. For CDSA, they want to know a little bit more. And then the one that wants to know the most is Public Health.
Yeah.
And their questionnaire is pretty detailed.
And our CFBL process similarly mimics that state line for processing, for distribution, for retail. Those structures are built properly with the right occupancy. They're direct infill. It's not a problem. I think mainly the biggest problem is the infrastructure that we're all dealing with across the board, is that we have a lack of infrastructure.
Yeah.
Question. I recall, and I don't know if it's been written out of the latest iteration of state documents, but isn't there an end to county approval coming up fairly soon, so that when somebody is applying to the state, their state is not checking with the county anymore?
I doubt that.
No. So no matter what, whether it's an annual permit, it doesn't really matter. We get the time period's the same. Now for temp, yes, because there will be no temporary issued on January 1, but there is still local authorization, and we're notified and given time to apply for all annuals.
The last temporary won't expire until March. So we will continue to receive inquiries from the state as they process Gesundheit. So I think we're a very far distance from not responding to local authorizations. That's going to continue to happen, I think, for some time. Probably through, probably through, for cultivation at least, probably through next year. I mean,
and we're still a little unsure of how provisional is going to play out.
Aren't we all?
But the local authorization for temp, local authorization for annual, we'll see what happens with provisional. Maybe that won't be needed because you're going from a temp to a provisional. But we have received local authorization for annual applications, and we continue to receive those.
I have a question about our narrow, as you put it, provisionals that were devised.
The temporary CFBL?
Right. What are the parameters of that then? It sounds like it doesn't really apply to anybody.
Those when those were put in, those were more for people who have a use or administrative permit to allow them to get the temporary while their use or admin permit is being processed. That's what the original intention of the temporary.
If they need an admin or use permit for the cannabis business license activity, it was a way for them.
So the way it would work was you submit your use permit to do retail and industrial.
Yeah.
You would submit your use permit and your business license.
If everything else matched up, you'd be given a provisional while your permit winds up. So you
would submit and pay for your use permit and then, as well as your business license. Planning, building, environmental health would make sure that other than the use permit, everything's there. And then also you have to be exempt from CEQA, which most of these projects are in buildings already. So they are exempt. And then you would get your temporary while the use permit process.
Got it. So that explains it, because I was trying to figure out, well, what is it?
What do?
Yeah. Okay.
It lets you move forward with the other process. This is a tough thing to ask the county to do, because not only is it sort of counter to the status quo, it is also, I think it's hard for us to talk about things that aren't there. It's easy to talk about the cannabis you're already growing. We can literally go there. I can go look at your plants. You can talk to me about your water use. We could do that. When all we have is a schematic. That's why it's so difficult. And I think
you really have no way to make sure that you really aren't doing something.
And the minute something happens...
No, but honestly, when we sign up on the building code, we're liable.
Yeah.
Right? We're saying that this is up to health and safety standards, and it didn't have sprinklers or something in it, and your building goes on fire.
I mean, we have businesses, non-cannabis businesses that will apply, who have been in operation for years, and your building has no safety features whatsoever.
You will get rid of it, yeah. Then code enforcement comes out to visit.
Oh, then they come out. So.
Hey, we're a complaint-driven county.
Well, yeah.
But the sprinklers would be in the plans. All the health and safety stuff would be on the plans, and it goes through inspections. And so as long as you're complying and passing your inspections all the way through. Now, if you don't put in a sprinkler system, you report back to the state, and the state says, "I'm sorry, you refuse to put in sprinkler systems. You don't comply anymore. So we're withdrawing the license."
I don't think the state has that mechanism.
No, and the reason why we do it the way it is the way it's set up. But we typically, like I said before, with all business licenses, unless that location is occupiable, we typically don't issue a business license. And there's certain things you have to do for your buildings to be occupiable. And that's where we kind of have that, well, what can we really do? And within the scheme we have of our current adopted ordinance for facilities business license, we can't issue a facilities license if if a building is not built to do an activity. Because then we could issue a business license. Look, let's say this. Let's say, but here's the thing, the micro business has to be 3 or 4, right? But if you have a building that's ready and good to go for processing, and you have your cultivation site, we'd be happy to issue a business license for processing and cultivation.
You could pick up this.
We actually have a few people that have gone that route, that are getting one business license at a time as they're completed. Not saying that's for everyone.
Of self-distribution people who are also applying for their micro business, because other than a majority of them want the manufacturing aspect, and so the distribution's allowing them to do the testing on their own, moving on their own, bringing it to retailers on their own. So really, what they're losing out is on the manufacturing. So that's what a lot of our applicants are currently doing.
What about if it's the free retail non-storefront could be farmers market, cultivation is one, that's 2.
Right.
And what if processing, which is legal to have in
Processing is not a part of micro. Micro is
manufacturing. So
it's cultivation, non-volatile manufacturing, distribution, and retail.
So if you have distribution, cultivation, and retail. But we have to have an F1 compliant structure for distribution, right, John? Oh my God, this is taking so long. Usually you're...
I'm trying to be thorough because I want to think through everything before I just say something. I have a question. Who works there?
That's where?
Nobody. I'm going to assume that this is no employees for the sake of argument here. So we'll just talk about that. So distribution, retail, cultivation. Cultivation's outside, so it's not inside. So it's not in the building. Okay, that one's off. Distribution, F1. Retail could be in a B occupancy.
Non-storefront, so they would be what the
farmers markets, Emerald Cup.
So you look
or
like
events.
Yeah.
Events or delivery.
Yeah. I mean, you'd be looking at either, and without having my code book and resources to flip through to give you a direct answer like I normally would for you, I'm seeing F1 for sure because I know that puts you in the best shape for anything post-cultivation. There is a possibility that could fall into an S1 or an S2, which is storage, which could possibly be pathways forward, but as far as finding it into a U occupancy, it's just not available at this point. There's
self-distribution we still have to have them for the state law.
I don't see self-distribution licensing.
So also the county did something weird, and I understand why it did it, but just so you know, there's a difference between local and state. So with distributor transport only, which is only for transportation, the local level there's just one type. At the state level there's 2 types. There's one for your own product. It's called self-distribution. You're not allowed to distribute, you're only allowed to transport, but it's called self-distribution. The one for you to be able to do your own or for others is just called distributor transport only. But at the county level, they only have one type of distributor transport. But then on the full distribution side, the county, thinking that it was trying to be helpful to cultivators, created a self-distribution category because it's not the same thing as having a big hub with lots of vehicles and storage and transporting for other stuff. So it created this self-distribution. But at the state level, they don't have a difference. We've asked them to create a separate one, but currently they don't have that.
It's pretty much a self-distribution with the county is a full state license with county restrictions on it.
But also county flexibility in the sense that you're allowing it in locations that you wouldn't otherwise allow a distribution license, and that's why you did it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't sell yourself short.
Self-distribution, like what structure?
In the county?
It's been permitted, because I review all the business licenses, it has to have a process. Like, where people are doing their drying, trimming, that's where I consider their structure to be.
That would be F1.
If that's what process they're buying sheds out of.
But different than processing. But
Correct.
processing cannot be, so that's a good question for you.
What if you're not
What's the question?
processing? What if you're just drying it, packaging the dry material without trimming it, and then just being able to drive that to a processing facility itself?
Where are you drawing it?
There's the kind of drying unit.
Self-distribution, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just transport only?
That's
I
transport
think I
only.
missed the question there. What was,
That's transport
is
only,
that what
that's
you were
not.
looking for? Because it's not going to deal, you're right, that you can dry in an agricultural exemption building.
I'm talking more about the ability to distribute, self-distribute your dry product. What, like, because the state is requiring it to be, they want to know what building it's in, and it's basically just a record-keeping area.
Okay, you're talking about transport only then?
Yeah.
You're only talking about transport only? Right, that's different than the county's self-distribution, which is a full distribution permit at the state, or license at the state level.
I'm mostly trying to figure out what structure is included.
But it's different for those two different types of,
So if you get a transport only, you don't require a structure.
What the state requires.
You're right, the state requires a storage area.
PCC is going to.
but it doesn't necessarily even have to have a building permit because if
It'd be
it's
100.
under 120 square feet,
Go ahead, Hannah.
but it needs to be bolted to the ground, then you have to show pictures of it being bolted to the ground or have a foundation and the locks.
But are they?
And you have to show where the storage,
Yeah, when they do
and you have
say
to
if
say
that-
what they're kept in.
If you're putting it in a touch shed, we go, that building's exempt.
But this,
But it,
this is looking up now. I'm seeing some hope here.
That's only for distributor transport only.
I know, but even though, like, if you, like, lots of people have structures, like, we have a shed that's permitted, but it's not F1 compliant, not even, because
What are you using it for, though?
we're using it for storage and for the records room
Okay,
temporarily.
right,
And ultimately, we're going to move it into the F1 compliant records.
right.
But, and I did apply for the distribution with the state, the distribution transport, like whatever that one was with the state, and I sent in the plan, and said, well, here's the security cameras, which is really funny, because
They don't need them anymore?
yeah, and so anyway, all the things, and they approved it for that. So if I had, went back to that scenario temporarily, distribution, self-transport, cultivation,
What you
and
did,
retail non-storefronts by going to farmer's market. Yeah, I know.
then you're fine.
Then we have three things, and then while I get my F1 building, and I can encourage, in my 15 farmers, they can do this. And most of them have the opportunity to
Formula down.
Most of them, I agree, but I think that what that would be required in the non-storefront retail license at the state level, they may find very challenging. But that has nothing to do with building.
I have no idea, I haven't got that far yet, because I stopped, the logjam happens at the F1.
Yeah.
But that's a possibility for building department to not have to sweat it as much.
As long as you're, yeah. If it's a distributor transport only, the problem is you can't go to farmers markets with a distributor transport only license.
You can't get there. You can't take your stuff there.
You need a full distribution, so there's the F1 occupancy, or you, or whatever.
Spoiled again.
on that note,
Oh, my goodness.
we will come back with answers on the things we mentioned before about micro-business stuff. And we have a few more things on here, like tier systems. Our next meeting is February 7th, because the first week of the year, so there's holidays and stuff. So February 7th, 2030, same thing.
And can we just say for the record that we are, unless otherwise, like this one, we meet the first Thursday of every month.
Yeah.
And regardless of whether the agenda comes out or not,
Yeah.
there was some confusion over that, including by me, that because we didn't see a notice, we weren't sure or not. But then
Every first Thursday, state is at 1:30, this one's at 3:30.
And we can see.
At the county, sometimes the building might change, but if you find here, we'll always be able to guide you to the right one. I'll stop by our office. And then if it is canceled, we will send out.
Okay.
Save the date, February, January.
I hope it was helpful.
It was helpful.
Thank you. Just information really at this point.
Well, I was
Hello?